So Rebecca, questions, so many. Let's answer them. What do you say?
I'm really, really ready this time.
Anonymous patron from Norway says, I'm currently in therapy for my eating disorder. One of the biggest reasons for my eating disorder is the drive to not have anyone look at me in a sexual way ever again. I get so triggered when I hear about men assessing women as a sexual partner as soon as they see them, or how men talk about women when women aren't around. Are all men who are attracted to women like this? It makes me want to not have a body for them to look at anymore. I feel violated knowing that men around me are thinking about me in a sexual way, even if they quote unquote can't help it. Is there a way to deal with this? Rebecca, what do you think?
Yeah. So an important part in your identity work could possibly be moving towards caring less about what people think about you. Obviously, you know, if it's you feel like you're being sexualized, that is an aggression, and it's hard to move away from that. But I would say anything you can do to feel like you have boundaries around you that allow your skin to feel like it's not being penetrated. And this is long-term work when I do it with clients, that it takes a long time to feel like every gaze isn't going right straight at you.
What entails that work?
Well, there's a lot of great drama therapy exercises about kind of understanding how big your shell needs to be and what color it is on the inside and what's its texture on the outside. There's a really good drama therapy technique where it can just be a piece of fabric or a rope, and you put it on the floor, and then the therapist stands on one side and the client stands on the other, and you take turns kind of moving towards each other, and the client can speak about when they get triggered, so you really get a sense of your personal space. I do that work a lot with clients, and I teach that when I teach expressive therapies. I teach that one.
Presumably because for some, they had that violated and or were never given a chance to learn that they matter and that their boundaries matter. And so it has to be taught for the very first time for adults because they never learned it when they were children.
And especially for women and femme-bodied people like you are, your sense of bodily autonomy this week is a prime example. It's constantly being said, like, you don't get control over your body. It's not really yours. It's here for me to look at, to make comments, to impregnate, to force you to carry that child. Like, it's, there are many ways in which it's stripped from people on a daily basis, and so it's hard to feel like you have it. I definitely, at some point in my feminist development, really began to think about, like, literally throwing my energy. Like, when I was on a bus, just throwing out, don't even look at me. And that was an exercise that I did often in public, or I've really noticed it whether my hair is long or short. I always wear it up when it's really long, and just for an experiment, I'll show people what will happen, and I'll put it down, and it's, the comments I get completely change. And so, yeah, it is a struggle, but I think understanding what in yourself is going to give you a sense of safety, so that you can have a body, because it would be very sad if you moved through life and never felt like you had a safe experience in this beautiful thing that you have that's called a body. I once had a great exercise teacher who would move very slowly, and she, every 5 minutes would say things like, "Thank you, body." And by the end of the class, we're all a little bit teary, because how often had I heard that? Thank you for this, imperfect size 14 apple-shaped body. Like, thank you, body. You got me through this class. You got me here today. Yeah, thank you, body.
Yeah, I like that. I think that there's a lot of power in that. It could be a major part, who knows, of the foundation of this. Because you could imagine, because to me, yes, this is a problem. Catcalling, but even just general male behavior on a bus ride or something, or at work. Men are socialized to do this, to be dominant, to be a real man. You have to do these kinds of things. And this idea of that men can't help it, I find to just be a ridiculous notion. Of course you can help it. And every time I hear that, I'm like, so you're that incapable of exerting control over your eyes, your gaze, and your mind. You have no control. You're compulsive about it. Now, if you have a flash of a thought like, oh, that's an attractive person, I'm going to look. Okay, it's an intrusive thought or a flash thought or an impulse or something. It's fine. It's there. But you have a choice to act on it or not. You're not a worm on instinct, walking or squirming through the soil. You're the most intelligent. You're a member of the most intelligent species that's ever lived on this planet. So, recognize your prefrontal cortex and use it. Now, might some people have particular difficult time with impulse control? Yeah, but there are ways of managing that.
And a fantastic example of this is a couple of years ago, before COVID, a bunch of young, mostly women, at Garfield High School reviewed the dress policy across Seattle Public Schools and recognized that, that for every 90 things that girls couldn't put their bodies in, there was one. I think for boys it was like, don't wear a mesh tank top, and then for girls it was like, skirts must be at this length, tops must be this long. Like, it just went on and on and on. And so they put a petition to the school board to say this is inherently sexist. And now Seattle Public Schools does not have a dress code, because the idea is that we are raising children to be in control of themselves. So with this client, I would really say, I hope you can find a safe space to be in your body. And I think one of the hardest steps is finding a way to connect to your body, to realize it's yours. It doesn't belong to all of these people, even though they're making all of these comments. And I know it's incredibly hurtful. And that's why safe places are so important. Like, and if you aren't yet, if you follow the Plus Bus in New York, it's in LA. It's a used clothing store for size 12 clothes and up. They go up to like 6X. And they do things like have pillow parties, pool parties, beach parties, where they encourage people to wear whatever they want and be with other people who are wearing whatever they want. And the episode of Shrill where she goes, there's an episode of Shrill where she goes to a pool party, and it's transformational. So if you can find other people to be with who will be accepting of your body, that would probably be the most healing thing. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be sexual either. That's often a misconception. Like, just be with people who are accepting of your body.
Mm-hmm. And you ask, are all men like this? And I'll say, no, absolutely not. And people who claim that are, stuck in the Stone Age regarding understanding of human beings and gender.
And it's that they don't want to have to change. If they say all men are like this, they're not willing to address that they just can't be disgusting all the time. Yeah,
it's the exact same thing that you would hear from people trying to uphold the misogynistic rape culture status quo in the workplace. You would hear men say this. It's like, well, I can't help but to comment on you and how, like, look what you're wearing, that kind of shit. I'm just like, my God, right? I mean, what is wrong with you? And what kind of indoctrination have you been? Of course, it's toxic masculinity in our society. But so, no, not all men are like this, for sure. I know many men who aren't like this at all. I know many men who are, but a lot of men have a hard time even admitting that they're not like this, because it's considered to be basically you're not a real man. And that is one of the worst things as a man you could ever be accused of. That's what we're taught. So there's a lot of men I find that will claim, I can't help it, because they want to uphold their masculinity and not be the target of bullying regarding not being a real man. I've seen this kind of thing before among some men. If you're hanging out like 5, 10 of you, and you don't really know each other that well, there's this need to somehow come across to everyone as if you're a real man in some way. Because if you don't know them, that is one of the first things that gets evaluated. It's like who's the alpha, or who's the real man and who's not, who's the weak one, who's the one we can make fun of, who's the one who is smart and respectable, who's not, and it all gets tied into this sort of thing. You ask, is there a way to deal with this? Rebecca provided some pretty great things. To me, no, there's not a way to deal with it, really. It's oppressive and it needs to stop. Obviously, there are things we can, as Rebecca was pointing out, you can do to mitigate it. But the fact remains is that this oppression and this harm is going to continue happening until our society decides to change, which I don't think is going to happen completely or even remotely completely in my lifetime. I do know some women, Rebecca, you can, I don't know, tell me about this, who will just tell people to fuck off, stop looking at me.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely an option.
If you feel safe. And I would also practice it in the mirror kind of a thing, because if you just sort of blurt it out, you might come across in a way that you're not used to. So just practice a phrase of just like, there's porn on your phone. Look at that. Stop looking at me.
But also, no. So what's always interesting, so like the classic example for me is on LinkedIn, how often I get asked out, or people in the background, like men are like, oh, I'm just reaching out to say hi. And it's like, ew, this is gross. And if I engage in any way and say, hey, I'm here for professional connections, they will say, oh, yeah, me too. Like, try as if to
LinkedIn. I mean, do you not know of Tinder? I mean, it's like,
And so on LinkedIn, I am very careful. I do not accept male. I don't say yes to anyone who's male if they're not in my field. And every once in a while, I'll get lazy and forget. And guaranteed, within 2 minutes, it's hey, how are you doing? I saw your profile picture. And this is interesting that this week, because I'm so freaked out about what the Supreme Court did with abortion, that of course I stepped into a fight with a woman who said, don't be upset with this. Look at your slutty profile picture. Of course, you're asking for this kind of content. And so I sent my profile picture, which is quite demure. It's one of those, it's the photo on the tarot cards that you liked. I was like, is this the photo you're referring to? Just curious. Like what, I don't know.
What was the argument? I don't even understand what she's trying to say.
She was trying to say there, and this, I've seen women do this a lot, that women should accept attention from men and see it as a compliment. And any woman who doesn't like that is prude and a feminist. And of course, feminists are anti-men and anti-femininity, which is really funny because there's a huge range of what feminists look like. But this idea that like we should be accepting this attention and we must be leading people on with our profile pictures. That's why this is happening. Right. I mean, I should have stayed 100 miles from this argument.
So this is someone that DM'd you or something?
No. This was a public conversation.
On Facebook or something?
On LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. Yeah. I had no idea that LinkedIn was so salacious.
It can be, and usually I avoid it, but not, when you're feeling down and you're like, oh, a fight, I'll get in there. So I sent my profile picture and was like, is this the type of picture that you're talking about that, clearly is, in the male gaze and should be thankful to get male attention? Obviously the whole thing was a huge waste of my time. But, women do promote this among other women. Not every woman, obviously, is a feminist. Not every woman believes that feminism is good for women, i.e. look at the Supreme Court and what was decided. So, yeah, this obviously who deserves, and then what kind of attention is appropriate, and then not understanding that for a person like this, just a negative comment will shred them to pieces, because some people will say, oh, he didn't attack you, and it's like, well, he didn't physically attack you in the way that you seem to think would make me uncomfortable. But this sliding into my DMs is not appropriate. Not what the site is for. And I used to report every single guy, and I got lazy this last time. But this reminds me.
How many times does it happen?
It happens once a month.
Oh, I mean, still. The other thing I'll say is, and, as a man, I don't have to deal with this, but I think I can relate on a certain level in a very, very minor way. Like when I, in the 90s, had very long hair down to my, waistline, I would get comments and looks, and people would say I look like I'll never forget this one time I was in the line for Subway sandwiches, and it was really long. And when I got to the front, it was really busy, and the workers behind, were really scrambling. And the worker glanced up at me and said, and what would you like, ma'am? Mm-hmm. And then very quickly said, oh, I mean, sir. And like, it was in South Seattle, like in Soto, and it was all a bunch of construction worker guys, like dock worker kind of guys. And they all snickered, like, and I remember, I don't think I said anything, but I think I might have said something like, it's fine. I don't care. Like, you made a mistake. Or it's fun. One, it's fine that you called me ma'am. I don't care. Two, it's kind of on you that you just assume everyone with long hair is a woman, And so, but it's fine, you know what I mean? But somehow this like...
That could be the worst thing.
Yeah. So I'd get a lot of that kind of energy, and particularly because at the time I was training to become a therapist, and I was working with a lot of youth. And I would go to their homes, and I would take them on outings. And so I looked like some kind of long-haired douchebag of some sort to the society, or dirtbag, I guess is a better term. And I would be walking around with a kid, like 10 years old, 12 years old. And people would be, and, I'm half Asian, and the kids were often not half Asian, so it just looked weird to a lot of people, and I would get a lot of really strange looks. Sometimes I'd bring them to the pool, which meant you had to go into the locker room. Actually, there were a lot of scenes like that. I could go into details about that mess. But I felt everyone's, and I was in Everett as well, which is a whole other kind of a thing, which is not as comfortable to me as Seattle. It's better now. But anyway, I found myself feeling like I wanted to, curl up and hide as I walked around. And eventually I was just like, fuck this shit. I'm going to stand tall, and I'm just going to look straight at people staring at me and go like, what? And, I wasn't angry. I wasn't confrontational, but in my head, I'm like, well, screw them. They're wrong. So I'm not going to try to hide. I'm not going to try to be invisible. I know that what they're doing is wrong. I'm okay. I don't feel good about it, but I'm not going to slink away or feel like I'm somehow being
less than.
Yeah. So Rebecca, you have a plug that you want to provide.
I do. Hey, everyone out there in podcast land. So 4 years I've been doing professional trainings for therapists, and I'm about to do my first workshop that's open to everyone for 3 days in October. I think it's the 20th till the 22nd. I'll be at the Pacific Northwest Art School, which is my favorite place to take an art class.
Where is it?
It's on Woodby Island, right in the middle. So if you come to the workshop, you got to stay on the island, because getting on and off is its whole thing. And Coopville's right in the middle, so it's like an hour from each end. And it's this great place to take an art class. One of the things it has is a tilted mirror on the ceiling, so you can do a demo and everyone in the room can see it from wherever they are. But it's just, I've spent 25 years of my life offering art experiences in rooms that weren't set up to make art. So this is really exciting for me. And I'll be doing the tarot card collage workshop. We'll do one day on major arcana, one day on coins and cups, which I call pentacles, I call coins, and one day on wands and swords. And we'll be using all the ephemera that I collect from estate sales and other places.
Actual physical swords or drawing swords?
We'll be drawing swords.
Oh, okay.
But I do have there are some props to get people inspired. I will not be asking anyone to participate in a sword fight, but there might be some drama therapy, kind of posing with your sword, thinking about your sword.
So this is pretty extensive. It's 3 days, you said.
3 days of art making with me in one of the most beautiful places. I mean, Whidbey Island is just like a fantasy land.
Yeah. And people will probably spend the night and maybe go to dinner together, that kind of thing. So that's a pretty big endeavor for you.
Yeah. Although I've warned, I think I'll do lunch with people, but when I do these workshops, I need 12 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
I will offer going to the thrift store together. I think like that for me, Coopville or one of the a couple of the towns have great thrift stores, so we can go searching for treasures together.
In fact, speaking of which, those cats behind up there. Ooh. We were talking about how I have all these cat statues. Uh-huh. I'm 80% sure those are from that thrift store in the middle of Whidbey Island. They were in the window. And I thought, well, those look cool. All right, so let's take a break. We get back. More questions. What do you say, Rebecca?
Yes.
So, Rebecca, I have a question for you, from me, which is, I've always called you Rebecca Bloom my entire life with you. We met 13 years ago-ish.
No. Well, yes. Okay.
And everyone else called you Rebecca, but I have heard you refer to yourself as Becca to your inner circle, and I feel insulted. So is it Rebecca or Becca?
So due to my dyslexia, I literally don't hear the difference. So I don't know what to say to that. I don't mean to keep you out of my inner circle. Feel free to call me either. And you'll notice I don't hear the difference. Now, if someone calls me Becky, I don't respond. But yeah, the difference between Rebecca. In fact, I have a friend named Becky, and it never crosses my mind that we actually have the same name.
Yeah, Becky is a wholly different. I wouldn't even think that was a shortening of Rebecca.
Yeah.
I would have thought Becky was just a name you were given, you know?
Yeah, so I don't hear the difference. I don't know why.
Huh.
And you should point it out when I do it, because I have no idea that I've done it.
Well, it maybe a couple years ago, you were saying that your close friend or your wife was saying, and then she said Becca, and I'm like, oh, so she calls you Becca? Like, and I'm calling you Rebecca? What am I? Chopped liver over here?
Do you have another name that you go by?
No, but people have nicknames for me. And I've gotten used to Kirk, but for decades, whenever someone called me Kirk, I'm like, oh, you must not be like in my circle, because everyone called me Honda.
Oh.
There was a long time that happened, such that fairly close friends of mine didn't even know I had another name.
They thought your name was Honda?
They just thought I was like Cher or something.
And you are like Cher, so this is appropriate.
And so when someone said Kirk, they're like, why are you calling him Kirk? Because it would have been maybe my mom was around or something.
Well, we also have a complicated experience in our family, which is that my sister-in-law is a Rebecca, and then my wife's best friend's wife is a Rebecca. So things can get very complicated, and that we do use last names. Sometimes we're just going by last names because there's just too many Rebeccas, and it's not a very common name.
Yeah.
So, and there might even be another Rebecca in there. Oh, right. One of my wife's best friends is also a Rebecca. So things can get very confusing.
Well, you're Becca B.
Yeah. Yeah. But then also Beth
What's your middle name?
Isadora. Rib. You can call me Rib for short.
I got it.
Yeah. Some people call me Reba. Yes. I mean, I also had
Reba. Is that short for Rebecca too?
Well, you can. No one does, but I think it was when Reba McEntire was popular, and you can kind of shorten.
Yeah.
It was just a joke.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, Reba.
Okay, Honda.
Yeah. I mean, like, Umberto calls me like Honditos or other kinds of names like that. And anyway, annual patron Amber from BC, she says, Hi, Kirk and Rebecca, because, Amber's not in the inner circle. Can Rebecca please tell us to take care of ourselves because we deserve it at the end of her episodes? Because I think she's referring to the fact
I did once. Last time I did it.
You often will kind of riff.
Yeah.
She says, I need the reminder, and it's such a good sign-off. I have a lot of unprocessed trauma, and the pandemic was the straw or boulder that broke the camel's back. Those people that left rude comments about you are distorted. You don't stigmatize anyone. Thanks so much for you and the Psychology in Seattle team. You guys are awesome. Yeah, that last little bit. I've just been getting a lot of hate emails and comments as I go into new territory, but I think it's starting to subside. But anyway, I don't think you need to do anything at the end of the episode, Becca.
Well, and part of it is I literally, by that point, we've been talking for 2 hours and I don't remember what I'm supposed to say. Like, if you might want to write that down and put it down right in front of me, because I'm so like in the moment, like, I don't know, take care of yourself. I don't know, because you deserve it. I don't know. Like, it's not... It's partly me riffing, which is fun, and partly that I don't remember what the catchphrase is. Well,
Berto has his shticks, Bob has his, and you have yours, and that everyone has to have their own.
Does anybody ever ask? I have seen that people want to know Berto's real job.
What are you talking about? He says his real job every episode.
And I do think of him. There was one episode where I was on with him where he said he was a paleozoologist or something, and often when I think of him in my mind, I'm like, oh yes, the paleozoologist.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's his job. Annual patron Megan says, can you talk about how to respectfully cross the aisle politically? So I made an episode recently about the ruling of the Supreme Court, and I said that I recommend, and have been for a long time, that if we're going to win the fight, we have to change some minds, and to do that, we have to have a technique that actually works and not one that creates more echo chambers. So they're asking for advice. I grew up basically in a Christian fundamentalist cult. My family still is anti-abortion, pro-guns, homophobic, etc., and I am queer, and I am not able to feel safe with any of my family members. But putting that aside, is there a way to talk to them to open them up, their minds, to other ideas? Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, there are some great books on this, kind of the divide that's developed in our country. And one of the main things that the left does that is alienating is to say the other side is stupid. They have that opinion because they're stupid. And so if you can let go of that and hold on to you have that opinion for a reason. I'm going to sit with you and get to know you as a person and know what's important to you. Sounds like family is really important to you. Your personal rights are important to you. Your values are important to you. I mean, change only happens when you really sit with someone and let them share their truths and don't push them away. I mean, as therapists, this is what we have to do, is sit in someone's story. It's not easy work. It's probably easiest not to start with your family. Your nervous system will only stay as an adult for about 45 minutes with your family, and then will revert.
At best.
At best. I know there are certain people in my family where I regress within 3 minutes. Well,
what Murray Bowen said was the average differentiated folks will lose differentiation like an hour before they meet up with their family.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you might not even work before you get there. So yeah, I would practice not with your family. That's probably the most triggering place. And that's a lot of my work, is like, how can we build on success? And we live in a very polarized time. So if there's anywhere that you can sit with people and have a discussion about anything, I mean, I think it's funny, Baby Winter, our dog that's like every kind of dog mixed together. We actually got his DNA tested, and it was 40% general dog. But he's also a lot Lhasa Apso, but not all. So he's got like long hair in weird places off his ears and stuff.
What?
Lhasa Apso. Those are those dogs that have incredibly long hair that goes down.
Oh, yeah. Show dogs with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're actually, for the Tibetan monks, like their personal guard dogs, which is why he's so barky. Anywho, he will melt anyone's heart. Like, we can be anywhere and people will look at him and start laughing. It's just the combination is just, there's so much going on. and then it's always that experience, like, and then they look up at us and see a lesbian couple. And, you know, if we can keep smiling and say, like, you smile at the dog, it's okay to smile at us too. But there's a lot of healing that needs to get done on both sides, obviously, if we're going to find a way to live together. And I think a huge piece of that is that if you can just respect that someone has come to those choices for a reason, and that change is possible. People do change their minds. And if they can just have enough exposure that you're a happy, healthy person, obviously not everyone is going to change their mind. But I've seen people change their minds in my lifetime.
Yeah, well said. Patron Chloe says, "Hey, Rebecca and Kirk, I've accepted the fact that I am a lesbian. My support system all know, and I feel safe with them. But being in Oklahoma, I'm not so sure that I'm safe to tell just anyone. My issue is that men occasionally hit on me, and it makes me panic. I try to show my disinterest without saying it, but they won't give in. It makes me extremely uncomfortable, and I'm just praying that they won't go there. It makes me mad that they do this, and I'm frustrated that they might believe that men and women can't just be friends. What can I say so that they will stop without saying what can I say so they will stop without having to tell them that I'm not attracted to men?"
I mean, yeah, some people just aren't going to back off. This is where, for me, the broken record technique comes in. You know, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, I have explosive diarrhea, no thank you. You know, I mean, whatever, you know, just if you can just, this is a horrible that we have to be trained like this, but if you can just, you know, stay calm, maybe find someone else to go hang out with, maybe pretend like you're taking a phone call and walk away. I mean, it's horrible that we have to come up with all of these ways to move away from people. But, you know, really, they have no right to assume that you're sexually interested in them. And if you can just hold that in your heart, they don't deserve to know anything about you. And even if I've had this situation, even if I told people I'm a lesbian, it doesn't mean their behavior is going to stop.
Oh, yeah. You just haven't been with a real man.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, don't feel like you have to handle this alone. You can just move over. Sometimes bartenders are trained, I don't know in Oklahoma, but I know it's popular in Seattle to be trained to say, like, this person's harassing me, I'm just here to have a good time. You could just say that real loudly. Hey, this person's harassing me. Anyone else here just here to have a good time and not be asked out on a date? Can we hang out? But it's kind of amazing that people think you're there for their attention.
Yeah.
And that's not your fault at all.
No, it's awful. Let's take a break. Get back. More questions. What do you say?
Okay.
All right, back from the break. Anonymous listener, she says, "I had a rough childhood, a codependent mother, alcoholic older brother. I saw a lot of ugly things. I watched an ex drink himself to death. I understand it's not my fault that it happened. I had no control, or should I have, and I should not have had control. But I have so much guilt about his death. I don't know how to reconcile in my heart and let it go. Therapists have told me I already know everything that they can tell me. Any thoughts about this?"
Well, I forgive you. I mean, I have had this come up with clients before, that something happened and they felt like they could have made a difference. And this is why codependent no more groups are so good, so that you can really separate his choices from what you can impact in the world. He was on his own, or they were on their own journey, and they weren't ready to accept help from anyone, it sounds like. and kind of understanding that that person made that choice is incredibly painful. I've had to address this in my personal life. I have friends that are still racked because they've lost people for this reason. It is so painful to watch someone choose drugs and alcohol over human connection. But that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. I think whatever you can do to honor their memory, while knowing that you're allowed to live a full, joyous life, I would recommend doing. I'm curious if it was not okay to fully grieve their death at the time, and anything that you can do to kind of mark their death and grieve it. Sometimes I've found that with clients that, like, at the time things were so chaotic that the grieving couldn't really happen then, and that's part of the reason that things get stuck.
Yeah.
Passing the ball to Honda over there.
Oh, wow. Okay. In addition to that, I'll say that it sounds like the therapist you've gone to either were a bad fit or didn't know what the hell they were talking about. To tell a client that, you say, therapists have told me I already know everything they can tell me. And I don't know what that means, but this is a perfect thing for therapy. One, to explore the foundation of this, which I'm just going to take a guess based on your description of your childhood, that codependency and self-blame and over-responsibility, which is codependency, was drilled into you, not only through modeling from your mother, but also potentially as a way to build self-esteem for you. A lot of codependent people were rewarded only for taking care of someone else who had a problem, and that's their entire self-worth. And so starting from the beginning about who are you and what are your needs, and what does it mean to be you outside of helping someone with a problem, you might have to start from the beginning, and finding a therapist that knows that very basic human experience and phenomenon would be a good thing.
I'm also going to say body-based work might be really helpful if you can see a dance movement therapist or go to a yoga class that specifically addresses grief. That a lot of times we hold this in our bodies, and you might have heard all the things you're supposed to hear, but it doesn't mean that you were able to let down and really grieve this person's choice. The folks that I've worked with, it's years of work, and on the anniversary of that person's death, it comes up all again that person died. So this work is incredibly painful. And yeah, all the codependency work is really powerful. I often will say to clients, it looks like you have a overdeveloped sense of responsibility. That's one of my favorite phrases. So if you want to look up that phrase and do some work around that, that's one of the most powerful uncouplings, as they say, in not family systems. Oh my God, I'm losing it today.
Internal family systems?
Internal family systems. So you've got to disengage that belief that you are in charge of this person's life. The only person's life you're in charge of is your own. And that's really, really hard.
Yeah.
I would love to be in charge of a lot of people's lives.
I wouldn't. I don't like that. I'm whatever the opposite of codependent is. I really just don't want to be responsible. In fact, that was one of the things that caused me to not want to be program director anymore. Was I was responsible for so many people, professors, students, and I don't like that feeling. I like to be side by side with people, or even under people. I don't like to be responsible for others.
Honda's not the top dog.
Well, yeah. I don't want to be blamed, I think is the thing. And so I don't even want that thing to begin, Anonymous listener says, "Hey, Kirk and Rebecca. Whenever I ask my 8-year-old about her feelings, she always smiles and says that she's great. Her dad and his fiance have been having issues, and in their relationship, and I've tried to ask her how she feels about them having their issues without coming off like there's a right answer. But I'm not sure what to say other than reassuring her she can tell me how she feels and it's okay. How do family therapists generally approach children her age with things like this? I've considered getting us in therapy together." She also says here, "Also, Nick Vile, as a closeted Bachelor fan, this is huge, LOL. I'm excited for what that means for the podcast." Yeah, the Nick Vile thing was interesting because when he reached out to me, I didn't know who he was. If they give me a link to their podcast or YouTube channel or something, I clicked on it, and his YouTube channel isn't huge. So I just thought, oh, he's just kind of like a low-grade YouTuber. If people are a fan of that, and the fans of that show are big fans, and so Nick Vile is one of the big kind of cast people.
Well, and you said walking around town with him, people would stop.
Yeah. We were in Pike Place Market, and people would be like, "I know you," and then they look at me and they'd be like, "Who's that?"
Who are you?
But in terms of what it means for the podcast, I don't think it means anything. There was a brief moment. I've had a few moments of buzz around me. Mm-hmm. Like when I did the first Love is Blind 2 years ago, there was a lot of buzz, and then there might have been some other moment in there. And then when I started talking about the trial, there was also a lot of buzz. And this time I was like, oh, it'll die off, and in a few months, for the most part, people will have forgotten me, and my sort of core listenership will still be there. So she's saying, the anonymous listener, 8-year-old daughter.
Yeah. Well, there's tons of play therapy. I mean, if she's still playing with dolls or doing imaginative play, I would just get some figures out and tell your own story and see which story she tells. Puppets, magic scarves, all of these things can offer kids a creative option. And she may not want to tell you the story. Dad may have also said, don't tell mom the story. So, I would just give her creative options to kind of say whatever she has to say. My favorite book on divorce is called Was It the Pudding? Which is these little dinosaurs trying to figure out why mommy and daddy aren't together anymore. I don't know if you have any books like that on divorce. You might start with your divorce and see if she's willing to talk to you about that. And sometimes, kids aren't ready. They don't have anything to say, and that's okay too. Right.
Yeah, totally. This is an important topic for parenting, but also for therapists who work with kids. And the play option is the standard. The amount of times that I would be, frustrated with my trainees or frustrated with colleagues as well, when they're talking about an 8-year-old that won't talk in therapy. And I'm like, so in what universe can an 8-year-old sit for an hour and talk? I mean, adults can barely do that. Mm-hmm. Most adults can't do it. So that just doesn't happen. Kids don't. And there are many kids, not all, who literally have never been asked any mm-hmm. kind of question about their inner life. Kids in a lot of families are treated as, seen but not heard kind of thing. Or at the very least, there's just no language. There's no opportunity. And it's like trying to ask them to do calculus. It's bizarre. And then they freak out because they know they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and then they retreat. So you start with play. And the other frustration I would run into with trainees, which I totally get, but trying to convince them that it's not just playing.
Right.
That you can play and draw or do Legos or play Uno and get to some deep stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, you're not always clear what's going on, but if you're intuitive about emotion and process and what's happening between the two of you, you can usually take a guess as to what might be happening, but you never know for sure. And even when we're talking explicitly with our adult clients about things, we also never really know. Are we talking about This, they could be talking about their boss and how they're having a problem, but really what could be happening is the client could be processing their feelings about you, the therapist, or about their father growing up. So the point is that it's important for everyone, kids and adults, to be able to be heard and understood and to express themselves and to be supported and have guidance about emotions, to have a chance where they're seen and heard and given some idea of what's going on with me. And you don't have to explicitly talk about the issues. I can't tell you how many, this is mainly colleagues, how many times I would hear colleagues say, yeah, so, the 10-year-old just refuses to, or the parent will bring in the kid and say, I've been trying to get, Johnny to talk about the death of his father for the past 3 years, and he refuses to talk about it. And I'm like, oh my God, stop it. It's not, I get the impulse. It's great. The impulse is good, but it's so misdirected. And I don't know where it comes from, this notion that somehow kids, even teens to some extent, that you could just ask them directly, tell me about your feelings about this negative event in your life. It's a massive ask to ask someone. It's for most just an impossible request. So you have to do it indirectly.
And I can see right behind you, you've got one of the action figures from Inside Out, which is a great movie.
Yeah.
To just say, oh, there's a variety of feelings.
Right. Watch the movie and talk about it.
And even not saying, what feelings do you have about what, but just saying, it sounds like you've got a fine person inside of you. And I wonder if there's a mad or sad person inside of you or a funny person inside of you. So just giving options, never asking yes or no questions, but just saying, or even giving yourself as an example. So I will often say, I'm doing okay, but I lost my keys today, which tells me I'm really, really distracted. And underneath that distraction, I think I'm really sad. Just kind of modeling that. And I think I've told the roses and thorns story in here before, but just take the time to model emotional intelligence at dinner, once a week, every night. If you can have a roses and thorns discussion, roses being what was the success of today and thorns being what was the hard part.
Yeah.
And then you've modeled that it's okay to have duality in every day.
Right. Yeah. Modeling is a huge part of this, that you could even just think of. So, and I would do this as a therapist a lot. If I wasn't managing to get somewhere with a client, I would maybe try to find some authentic story that I felt might be adjacent to what they're going through, not to tell them how they're supposed to feel, but to give them a model of how someone looks inside of themselves, and that it's okay to express that or talk about it. So, you can think about that. The other thing to think about is obviously therapy. The other thing to think about is to ask yourself, hypothetically, if there was a reason why your daughter doesn't want to tell specifically you about this feeling, what might be that reason? And when there are breakups, and I don't know the circumstances around anonymous listener and the father of your child, but taking a guess that there might have been at least some conflict at some point in the past, and maybe some residual conflict with him, that or at least your child might think that, your child might wonder if it's even, I don't know, a possible landmine field to even talk about her dad at all in any way, shape, or form. And so she just as a rule, just decides that she's going to be quiet. Or the dad punishes her for talking about you or something. So she's just like, I'm just not going to talk about anyone because I don't want to get involved in this.
Well, and also kids tend to blame themselves.
Right.
So if she's already been through one divorce, the idea that she might have to go through a second divorce might be real overwhelming, and it might just be better to shut down.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think about this one kid. He was, 10-ish, and the parents got a divorce while I was seeing, or split. The father moved out, and the divorce was, going to be happening at some point officially. And the kid, I was meeting with him alone, and it came out that he thought it was all his fault that they were getting divorced. And, if he was 5, I would have been like, oh, okay. I mean, they're 5. But he was old enough and he was smart enough. He might have even been a little older. Anyway, no, I think he was about 10. And what he believed was that, because according to him, his parents were fine. He didn't really know, and that was a good thing he didn't know. Dad tells him, I need you to mow the lawn or something like that. And he was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it later. And then he blew it off and didn't do it. And it was something that he would frequently do, and there would be a power struggle between him and his parents. And then later that night, the parents sat them down, the kids, and said, Daddy's moving out. And the kid was convinced it's because he didn't mow the lawn.
And that's traumatic memory when you pair something. I was actually thinking about this on the way over, that you pair something that doesn't really belong with something as this must be the reason.
Right.
And, we all do that. I was T-boned in a car accident 10 years ago, and there's a corner near my house where I really have to look over. And every time I'm like, corners like this are where bad things happen. And I have to remind myself, like, you were in that one accident 10 years ago.
Right.
You're going to be okay.
Right. Okay. Speed round questions for Rebecca.
I'm excited.
Patron who calls himself Progressive Christian. So he actually submitted, quote unquote, speed round questions for Rebecca. Apple or Android?
100% Apple from the very beginning.
100% Android. Do you sleep with your socks on?
I start with my socks on, and I usually kick just one off.
Oh, what kind of a monster are you?
So when you change the sheets, there are tons of socks down at the
Why
bottom.
do you take just one off?
I don't know. It's unconscious. And then also you will also see me in the morning walking around the house with just one sock.
Oh, so you don't do it on purpose?
No.
Is it always the same foot?
Maybe it's the right foot. I don't know. But one foot gets hot and the other foot does not.
Weird. That would be the worst case scenario. It's always socks off for me, unless it's really cold, because I can't stand having super cold feet. So I'll leave my socks on, but as soon as my feet get warm, I got to take my socks off.
But here in the Northwest, starting with socks on can be important. It is cold. It's a damp cold here.
Yeah.
At night, 9 months of the year.
Yeah. What animal best resembles your personality?
Well, the animal I spend the most time with is a rescue Chihuahua Terrier mix. And I would say the animals I relate to the quickest are rescue dogs. I'll also say that horses inherently don't like me. So I guess rescue dogs are I just do really well with them.
But do they resemble your personality?
Yes. Suspicious. Once they warm up to you, they never want to let you go. Picky.
Okay.
They have weird thoughts about weird
But oddly,
things.
you're a purebred, so.
It is very strange. But I think all Jews are like rescues. Like, I think we've been on the bottom so long.
I don't know what animal best resembles my. I'm
looking right at you and I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
You kind of look like a panther.
Well, that's funny because, what came to my mind were those kinds of big cats. Like
You're a big cat.
I thought of
Honda's a big cat.
I thought of a panther or a snow leopard.
Oh, you could be a snow leopard.
But I think panther might even be more. But I don't know. Those are predators,
but you're very
like a tame panther. Maybe.
Yeah, you're very stealth. You have a laser focus like no one I've ever met. You just get stuff done. And you can get it all done by yourself, like a predator. I mean, you can do all the jobs.
Okay.
If people could see the setup this man has developed for himself. Like he does it. I don't know. What animal is a jack of all trades?
Patron Progressive Christian saying, how can I be an LGBTQ plus ally while maintaining my religiosity and faith?
Well, when I've been asked this question before, and I don't know what it quite means for you, but oftentimes it means I don't want to make any waves in my religious world. And I would just say, if you're truly an ally, things might get bumpy in your religious world. You might have to stand up for things. You might have to confront things. You might have to say, I view things differently. I had an experience talking about this topic, and it was at a presentation, and one of the women said, "I can't believe that Christians act like this." And what I regret to this day that I didn't say is, well, you could probably reach them better than I could if you could go. This kind of loops back to that conversation that we had earlier, that you are straddling a line, you are in both worlds, and you might have to have some uncomfortable conversations, and you might lose some friends or some status in the process. I mean, that is what happens when you identify with a marginalized group.
Yeah. I mean, there are Christians who march at gay pride, and they have their banner like, we are so-and-so Catholic Church, and we stand with our LGBTQ plus parishioners and community. So there's some very overt ways in which you or your church organization...
I mean, it's as simple as, do you go to church with a pride flag on your lapel? Like,
exactly.
What would happen?
Yeah, exactly. When you hear conversations among other Christians that is bigoted, do you say something? And is it, is it safe for you to say something, but do you say something? As you were talking about having those difficult conversations as an ally, because sometimes bigots will speak only their bigot language when they think they're not with the target identities.
Yeah.
And so for me, for example, as a straight person, if I'm around other straight people, I'll hear bigoted, homophobic, heterosexist language because they think that I'm not going to say anything or that I agree with them or something. Over the years, I've educated myself, not only just education-wise, but also just knowing the experience of LGBTQ plus people, getting it in my bones. So it's not something I'm rattling off as a tagline or something. Like even the way sometimes people talk about allies, I find to be fine, but I also find it to be like, look, we are the oppressed group and you're an ally and you are here to help us. Whereas for me, I don't care who's being oppressed. I don't care what unfairness. I don't care what injustice is happening. It's to me too. I'm not a woman. But the anti-abortionist, it affects me. I don't have to drum up feelings I don't have to say, well, for the women in my life. It's just like, how about you just recognize that injustice harms everybody and it is inherently wrong. I don't have to be a Native American to recognize the atrocities, And you shouldn't have to be a Japanese American to recognize the fact that we were locked up and have the feelings thereof that we were locked up during World War II. You don't have to be one of us to get enraged by it. And so anyway, I find, okay, I am technically an ally, but I am deeply interested in changing the bullshit because everyone wins when we change it.
Well, but also this book keeps coming up for me, but what really offends people is blurring the gender lines and showing body parts that are supposed to be hidden. I mean, I'm personally thinking about assless chaps right now and how that it's so provocative. But Prince did it too. But this idea that
so did David Lee Roth.
Yeah. Who is Jewish. But this idea that you can show your body and be provocative and be sexy is quite overwhelming because Pride just happened. And I did the Dyke March. I haven't done it in years. And I was marching for a while behind a woman who was wearing a thong and had a massive octopus tattoo where the legs were coming out of her ass crack. And so it was just really intense. But I was thinking, like, this is what queerness is. And there are other places in straight culture where this happens. Burning Man is a classic example. But this idea that, like, my body is mine can be really, really terrifying to a lot of people. You don't have to subscribe to gender norms or any other societal norms about how you dress and how you, quote, act in public. Yeah. I will say also to this person that's asking about allyship and their Christian culture would be like, what if you had a reading group in your faith club and read a book like Getting to They Them or any kind of gender workbook or any book on sexuality or gender Liam Colley has a new book on queer conception. What if you read a book what it was like for queer people to have babies? You know, I mean, there's a lot of education that can happen that can help answer questions. And if you can start that conversation, it would be real, real nice. Because I'm tired of being asked to do that education for free.
Yeah.
Big sigh.
So the next question is so in depth for you, Rebecca.
I know.
That we should do it next
question.
time.
Yeah. So let's just say someone asked me.
Well, we can do it next time.
Okay. I'll just say in the future, we will be addressing art, how art impacts absolutely every part of someone's existence.
Yeah. It was annual patron Soft Noodles who asked some really good questions.
Good name. I love some soft noodles.
Too soft or kind of soft?
Not too soft. No.
Yeah.
I'm thinking ramen. Big noodles.
Ooh,
I'm a big noodle person.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get into noodles. Yeah.
Because there's lo mein, which is the skinny ones.
Yeah.
And then there's chow mein, which is the thick. But no, what's the thick one?
I don't know. That's Chinese.
Okay. I like ramen. A thick noodle.
Okay.
Or a hefty round noodle.
Yeah. Well, udon. Mm-hmm. That's thick.
You know, you can get that delivered. Super yummy.
Oh, maybe I'll get that. Anyway, it's udon. It's not udon. It's futon. It's not futon. And technically, it's Honda. It's not Honda.
Oh, sorry, I've been mispronouncing.
Yeah. So in my family, when we talk to each other, it's Honda. Mm-hmm. But when we talk to the outside world, it's Honda. And everyone out there, take care of yourself. Truly. Why should they do that, Rebecca?
Because they're worth it.
She says with a question mark at the end of it. Come on, really own it. That one patron really needs you to reassure them that they deserve it.
Take care of yourself because you are worth it.